Keep running! Don't look back!
Stop!
I hear something!
No!
Get down!
I know! Here! Here!
Keep running!
I'm slipping!
Grab her!
Leave her alone!
We're not letting you go!
Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Thank you so much for being here today. In this story, we follow the heartbreaking yet hopeful journey of Tieu Lac, a young woman forced to endure endless hardship while working tirelessly to repay the debts of her adoptive parents. Just when her life reaches its darkest moment, she's kidnapped by ruthless men who see her only as a means to settle money. At the edge of despair, fate intervenes. A young CEO unexpectedly appears, rescues her, and risks everything to help her escape. Their flight into the deep forest becomes more than a chase for survival. It marks the beginning of trust, protection, and a new chance at life. Faced with fear and uncertainty, Tieu Lac must decide whether to continue struggling alone or accept a hand that offers safety, dignity, and hope. If you enjoy emotional, real-life inspired stories filled with drama, compassion, and powerful turning points, this channel is for you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next touching story. Your support means everything to us, and it helps us continue sharing meaningful stories like this one. Now, let's dive into the story together. Tieu Lac had grown used to exhaustion long before it became a visible part of her face. Every morning, before the sky fully brightened, she was already awake, tying her hair back with trembling fingers and preparing herself for another day of relentless labor. She worked wherever she could, carrying heavy loads, cleaning, serving, doing jobs that others refused to do. Anything that would earn her a few more bills to tuck carefully into her worn wallet. Every coin mattered because every coin went toward the debt her adoptive parents owed. They were not bad people, just weak and unlucky, and Tieu Lac bore their burdens silently, believing that endurance was the only way a family like hers could survive. At her workplace, Tieu Lac rarely spoke unless spoken to. She lowered her head, accepted harsh words, and endured unfair treatment without complaint. Her hands were often bruised, her back aching from hours of standing and lifting, yet she never allowed herself to rest. Rest, to her, felt like a luxury she could not afford. When night came, she returned to her tiny rented room, washed the dirt and sweat from her skin, and counted her earnings again and again, calculating how much closer she was to clearing the debt. Hope, for her, was not a dream. It was a number slowly shrinking on a page. What Tieu Lac did not know was that danger had already begun circling her life. The debt she was trying so desperately to repay had attracted the attention of ruthless men, people who did not believe in patience or mercy. They had learned about her sacrifices, her obedience, and her vulnerable position. To them, Tieu Lac was not a human being, but a convenient solution, a body that could be exchanged, a price that could be collected. They watched her from afar, choosing the right moment to strike, confident that a girl like her had no one to protect her. That moment came on an ordinary afternoon, one that began like every other exhausting day. Tieu Lac was at work, her clothes stained with sweat and dust, her arms sore from hours of effort. She was focused only on finishing her tasks quickly so she could earn her pay and go home. She did not notice the unfamiliar eyes watching her, nor the shadow that lingered too close behind her. When a hand suddenly grabbed her arm, she froze in shock before fear exploded through her chest. She tried to scream, but another hand covered her mouth, dragging her away before anyone could react. The world around her turned chaotic and unreal. Tieu Lac struggled with all the strength she had left, kicking and twisting, her heart pounding wildly as terror overwhelmed her. The men spoke in low, cruel voices, telling her to stop resisting, telling her she was already worth something to them. Their words sliced deeper than any physical pain. In that moment, Tieu Lac finally understood the truth she had always been too afraid to face. No matter how hard she worked, no matter how much she sacrificed, she was still powerless in the eyes of people who only cared about money. As they forced her into a waiting vehicle, Tieu Lac's thoughts scattered in despair. She thought of her adoptive parents, of the debt that had chained her life, of the future she had never dared to imagine. Tears streamed down her face, silent and burning, as she realized they intended to trade her away to settle what they owed. She was no longer just a daughter trying to protect her family. She had become the final payment. In that suffocating moment, Tieu Lac felt her world collapse completely. The strength that had carried her through endless days of hardship seemed to slip away, leaving only fear, humiliation, and a deep sense of injustice. She did not know if anyone would come for her, or if this was where her story would end. All she knew was that for the first time in her life, working hard was no longer enough to save her. At the edge of the city, where the concrete streets slowly gave way to untamed wilderness, fate was quietly rearranging two lives. The young CEO had been driving through the area, his mind burdened with unfinished business and unanswered questions. He was not a man who often acted on impulse. Every decision he made was usually calculated and precise. Yet on that afternoon, something pulled his attention away from his phone call and toward a chaotic scene unfolding near the roadside. A struggle, muffled cries, and the unmistakable tension of violence made him slow the car, his instincts screaming that something was terribly wrong. Through the windshield, he saw a group of men forcing a young woman forward, her movements frantic and desperate. Her clothes were dirty, her face pale with fear, and her resistance, though brave, was clearly overpowered. Without allowing himself time to weigh the consequences, the CEO opened the car door and stepped out. The authority he carried in business seemed to sharpen into something more primal now. His voice cut through the air, commanding and cold, demanding they release her. For a brief second, the men hesitated, surprised that someone would dare interfere. That hesitation was all he needed. The situation erupted into chaos as he moved swiftly, pulling Tieu Lac out of their grip and positioning himself between her and the men. Harsh words were exchanged, threats thrown like knives, and fists soon followed. The CEO was not reckless, but he was determined. Using every ounce of strength and awareness he had, he fought back just long enough to create an opening. He grabbed Tieu Lac's trembling hand, his grip firm and reassuring, and shouted for her to run. They ran without direction or plan, guided only by instinct and the pounding of fear in their chests. The sound of angry shouts and footsteps followed close behind as they abandoned the road and plunged into the forest. Branches whipped against their faces, roots threatened to trip them, and the dense canopy above swallowed what little light remained. Tieu Lac could barely keep up, her lungs burning, her legs screaming in protest, yet the CEO never loosened his hold on her hand. Every time she stumbled, he pulled her back to her feet, urging her forward with steady determination. The forest seemed endless, its shadows growing deeper as they moved farther away from the city. The men's voices gradually faded, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the frantic rhythm of their breathing. When the CEO finally slowed, it was only after he was certain they were no longer being followed. He led Tieu Lac to a hidden clearing, shielded by thick trees and uneven terrain, a place where even sound seemed reluctant to travel. There, Tieu Lac collapsed to her knees, her body shaking uncontrollably. Tears spilled freely now, mixed with gasps for air and quiet sobs she could no longer hold back. The CEO crouched in front of her, careful not to overwhelm her, his own breathing still heavy from the escape. For the first time, he truly saw her, not just as someone in danger, but as a fragile soul who had been carrying too much for too long. He spoke softly, telling her she was safe, that no one would take her away again. His words were simple, but his tone held an unwavering certainty that cut through her fear. Tieu Lac looked up at him, her eyes filled with disbelief and confusion. She had never expected anyone to risk themselves for her, especially a stranger. To her, people like him existed in a different world where power and protection were never in short supply. As they sat there, surrounded by the quiet breathing of the forest, an unspoken bond formed between them. The CEO removed his jacket and gently draped it over her shoulders, shielding her from the cold and from the memory of what had almost happened. He asked no invasive questions, offered no empty promises, only presence, calm, and protection. In that moment, the forest was no longer a place of fear, but a fragile refuge, marking the beginning of a connection neither of them had planned, yet neither could deny. Night settled slowly over the forest, wrapping the world in a deep, uncertain silence. The air grew cooler, and the sounds of insects filled the space between Tieu Lac and the young CEO as they sat together in the hidden clearing. The danger had passed, but its shadow still lingered in her trembling hands and distant gaze. She hugged the jacket closer around herself, her thoughts tangled with fear, shame, and a quiet disbelief that she was still alive and free. The CEO broke the silence first, his voice calm and steady, as if he were afraid that speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile peace they had found. He told her his name and asked gently if she was hurt. Tieu Lac shook her head, though her body ached in places she had learned to ignore. When he asked about the men and why they had taken her, her eyes filled with tears again. Slowly, haltingly, she told him everything: the debt, her adoptive parents, the endless work, and how she had been treated like an object instead of a person. She expected judgment or pity, but instead she found quiet understanding in his expression. He listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening as her story unfolded. To him, the numbers and contracts he dealt with every day suddenly felt hollow compared to the reality she described. When she finished, she lowered her head, ashamed of her own helplessness. It was then that he spoke words she had never heard directed at her before, that none of this was her fault. The debt, the cruelty, the choices forced upon her were not a measure of her worth. His certainty unsettled her more than anger ever could. After a long pause, he made an unexpected offer. He told her that returning to her old life would only place her back in danger, that the men who had taken her would not give up easily. Then, in a tone free of arrogance or pressure, he suggested she come and stay with him. He explained that his home was secure, that she would be protected there, and that he could help her resolve the debt legally and safely. More importantly, he said he wanted to make sure she was cared for, not as an obligation, but as a choice. Tieu Lac's heart raced as she processed his words. Everything inside her screamed to refuse. She had survived by relying on herself for so long that trusting someone else felt terrifying. Accepting his help felt like stepping into a world she did not belong to, a world of wealth, safety, and unfamiliar kindness. She worried about being a burden, about owing yet another debt, this time one she could never repay. She voiced those fears softly, her hands clenched in her lap. The CEO met her gaze, his expression firm yet gentle. He told her she did not owe him anything, that staying with him would be about recovery and safety, not repayment. He promised her freedom, to work if she wished, to rest if she needed, to leave whenever she chose. The control she had lost over her life, he said, would be returned to her. Silence followed, thick and heavy with emotion. Tieu Lac stared into the darkness beyond the trees, listening to her own heartbeat. She thought of the small room she rented, the endless shifts, the fear that now chased her steps. Then she looked at the man beside her, someone who had stepped into her nightmare without hesitation and offered her a way out without conditions. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future not defined by debt or survival. Finally, she nodded. The movement was small, almost imperceptible, but it carried the weight of a lifetime of endurance. She agreed to go with him, not because she was weak, but because she was tired of being alone. The CEO exhaled quietly, relief flickering across his face. He helped her to her feet, careful and respectful, as if afraid of breaking something fragile and precious. As they prepared to leave the forest and return to the world beyond it, Tieu Lac felt something new take root inside her. It was not love, not yet, but a fragile trust and a cautious hope. With each step she took beside him, she crossed an invisible line between the life she had endured and the life she was finally allowing herself to begin.
Hello, xin chào tất cả các khán giả của kênh Lý Tiểu Lạc Review. Vậy là câu chuyện của chúng ta ngày hôm nay đã kết thúc tại đây. Trong câu chuyện của chúng ta ngày hôm nay đã kể về nội dung đó chính là việc Lý Tiểu Lạc đã bỏ trốn không thành công. Trên con đường bỏ trốn thì cô đã bị bọn xấu bắt lại với mục đích là sẽ đưa cô đi gả cho chồng cũ của cô để gắn nợ. Nhưng mà cô thật là may mắn khi vị CEO trên đường đi đã nhìn thấy cảnh cô đã bị bọn xấu bắt cóc, vị CEO đã ra tay và cứu giúp cô và cả hai cùng nhau chạy trốn. Trong lúc chạy trốn thì vị CEO và Tiểu Lạc đã rất là may mắn đã ẩn nấp thành công nên bọn xấu không thể tìm ra được Tiểu Lạc và vị CEO. Sau đó vị CEO đã đề nghị để cho Tiểu Lạc được an toàn thì Tiểu Lạc hãy về ở tạm căn nhà của vị CEO để anh có thể giúp đỡ cô và Tiểu Lạc cũng đã đồng ý. Mọi tình tiết hấp dẫn về câu chuyện Tiểu Lạc cũng như vị CEO sẽ còn được kể ở các video tiếp theo. Các bạn đừng quên bấm vào nút subscribe để đăng ký kênh sẽ nhận được thông báo mới nhất về các câu chuyện sẽ được phát sóng hàng ngày trên kênh Lý Tiểu Lạc Review nha. Nếu các bạn thấy video hôm nay hay, hấp dẫn và mới lạ, hãy cho mình xin một nút like, share và để lại bình luận đóng góp ý kiến ở dưới video nhé. Mọi ý kiến của các bạn sẽ đều được mình ghi nhận và sẽ có sự cải thiện nội dung trên kênh của mình. Cảm ơn các bạn rất nhiều. Thanks for watching my video. Please continue support my channel and subscribe my channel everyone. Bye bye.